My wife's ex-husband tried to kidnap our children during my custody week. The Amber Alert and his arrest made him reconsider visitation. I never thought I'd be the kind of guy dealing with custody drama when I married my wife 3 years ago. She had 2 kids from her previous marriage, and I figured we'd all blend together like one of those happy families you see in movies. Boy, was I wrong about how complicated things could get. The ex had been getting more and more aggressive about the custody schedule lately. Every time it was our week with the kids, he'd find some excuse to show up at our house unannounced. He'd claim he forgot to give them something important, or that there was a family emergency he needed to discuss. My wife would get this look of pure exhaustion every time his name popped up on her phone. Last Tuesday started like any other day during our custody week. I was making breakfast for the kids before school, scrambling eggs the way they liked them, when I heard a car door slam outside. Through the kitchen window, I saw him walking up our driveway with that determined stride he always had when he was about to cause trouble. My wife was already at work, so it was just me and the kids. He started banging on the front door, demanding to see them. I told him through the door that it wasn't his scheduled time, but he kept insisting there was some kind of family emergency. The kids were getting scared, asking me what was wrong with their dad, why he was yelling like that. I made the decision to call the police, but before I could even dial, I heard the back door rattling. This guy had actually walked around to the back of our house and was trying to get in through the sliding glass door. My heart started racing as I realized this wasn't just his usual boundary-pushing behavior. The kids were huddled together on the couch, and I could see the fear in their eyes. I grabbed my phone and started dialing 911, but then I heard glass breaking. He had actually broken the lock on the back door and was coming inside our house. I couldn't believe what was happening. I rushed the kids upstairs to the master bedroom and locked the door behind us. I could hear him downstairs calling their names, telling them he was there to take them somewhere safe. His voice had this manic quality I'd never heard before, and it made my skin crawl. While I was on the phone with the 911 operator trying to explain the situation, I heard his footsteps coming up the stairs. The kids were crying now, asking me what was happening to their dad. I didn't know what to tell them because I was just as confused and terrified as they were. He started pounding on the bedroom door, demanding I let him see his children. The operator was telling me that officers were on their way, but I could hear the desperation in his voice getting worse. Then he said something that made my blood run cold. He told the kids to pack their bags because they were going on a trip. I realized in that moment that he wasn't just having a breakdown, he was planning to take them somewhere. The custody arrangement had been getting more contentious lately, and my wife had mentioned that he'd been talking about moving to another state. Suddenly, all the pieces started clicking together in my mind. The police arrived just as he was trying to break down the bedroom door. I could hear them shouting commands downstairs, and then everything went quiet. The kids were trembling against me, and I was trying to stay calm for their sake, but inside I was falling apart. When the officers finally got upstairs, they found him sitting on the floor outside our bedroom door crying. He wasn't resisting arrest, but he kept saying over and over that he just wanted to protect his children. The whole scene was surreal and heartbreaking at the same time. The kids had to watch their father get handcuffed and led away by police officers. I'll never forget the look on their faces, confusion, fear, and this deep sadness that no child should ever have to experience. They kept asking me if their dad was in trouble, if he was going to jail, if they'd ever see him again. After the police left, I called my wife at work. She came home immediately, and we spent the rest of the day trying to comfort the kids and figure out what the hell had just happened. The police told us they'd found packed bags in his car, along with what looked like travel documents and a significant amount of cash. That's when we learned the full extent of what he'd been planning. He had apparently been preparing to disappear with the kids for weeks. He'd withdrawn money from various accounts, researched places to live in states that don't have reciprocal custody enforcement, and even looked into changing their identities. The detective assigned to our case explained that this wasn't uncommon in contentious custody situations. Parents sometimes convince themselves that the only way to protect their children is to take them away from the other parent entirely. The scary part was how methodical and planned out everything had been. My wife was devastated. She blamed herself for not seeing the signs, for not taking his increasingly erratic behavior more seriously. She spent hours going through old text messages and emails, looking for clues she might have missed. The guilt was eating her alive. The kids were struggling too, but in different ways. The older one became withdrawn and started having nightmares about police officers taking people away. The younger one kept asking when Daddy was coming back, not understanding why he couldn't just come home and say sorry. We had to explain to them that their father had made some bad choices, but that he still loved them. It was one of the hardest conversations I've ever had to have. How do you tell children that their parent tried to steal them away from everything they knew? The legal proceedings that followed were a nightmare. There were court appearances, psychological evaluations, and endless paperwork. My wife had to take time off work to deal with everything, and the stress was taking a toll on our entire family. But then something unexpected happened. About 2 weeks after his arrest, we got a call from his attorney. He wanted to have a conversation about modifying the custody arrangement. At first, we thought it was just another manipulation tactic, but the attorney insisted that his client had had a change of heart. We met at the attorney's office, and I barely recognized the man sitting across from us. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in 2 weeks. His eyes were red and hollow, and he seemed to have lost a significant amount of weight. When he started talking, his voice was barely above a whisper. He told us that sitting in that jail cell had made him realize what he'd almost done to his children. He'd been so focused on his anger toward my wife and his fear of losing his kids that he'd lost sight of what was actually best for them. The thought of traumatizing them the way he had was keeping him awake at night. What really got to me was when he started talking about the moment he saw the fear in his children's eyes when the police arrived. He said it was like a switch flipped in his brain, and he suddenly understood that he had become the thing he thought he was protecting them from. He proposed a new custody arrangement that would give him supervised visits for the first year, with the possibility of gradually returning to a more normal schedule if he completed anger management classes and regular counseling sessions. He also agreed to pay for the kids to see a child psychologist to help them process what had happened. My wife was skeptical at first, and honestly so was I. We'd been through so much manipulation and drama that it was hard to believe this was genuine. But there was something different about his demeanor, something broken and humble that we'd never seen before. The most surprising part was when he looked directly at me and apologized for what he'd put our family through. He acknowledged that I'd been taking good care of his children and that his actions had put them in danger. It was the first time he'd ever spoken to me like I was a human being rather than an obstacle. We agreed to try the new arrangement, but with strict conditions. All visits would be supervised by a court-appointed monitor, and any violation of the agreement would result in immediate suspension of visitation rights. He also had to wear a GPS ankle monitor and couldn't come within 500 feet of our house. The first supervised visit was awkward and tense. The kids were excited to see their father, but they were also cautious in a way they'd never been before. They kept looking at the monitor and asking why the nice lady had to stay in the room with them. It broke my heart to see how the whole situation had changed their relationship with their dad. Over the following months, something remarkable started happening. The man who had been so angry and unpredictable began to transform into someone I could actually respect. He was consistent with his appointments, never missed a visit, and genuinely seemed to be working on himself. The kids started to relax around him again, but they were different too. They were more mature, more aware of adult problems than children their age should be. They'd ask questions about why Daddy had to have a lady watch him, why he couldn't come to our house anymore, why everything had to be so complicated. My wife and I had to learn how to navigate this new dynamic. We'd gone from being adversaries with her ex to being reluctant partners in helping the kids heal from their trauma. It wasn't easy, and there were plenty of setbacks along the way. About 6 months into the new arrangement, something happened that changed everything again. The kids were at one of their supervised visits when the older one asked their father why he'd tried to take them away. The monitor later told us that he broke down crying and gave them the most honest answer he could. He told them that he'd been scared and angry and that he'd made a terrible mistake. He explained that sometimes adults make bad choices when they're hurting and that he was sorry for scaring them. He promised them that he was learning how to be a better person so that something like that would never happen again. That conversation seemed to be a turning point for everyone. The kids started asking fewer questions about the incident, and they began to enjoy their visits with their father again. He started sending them cards and little gifts on days that weren't his scheduled visits, but he always asked permission first. The most unexpected development came almost a year later. His attorney called to say that he wanted to discuss the possibility of me adopting the children. At first, I thought it was some kind of trap or manipulation, But when we met to discuss it, I realized he was completely serious. He explained that he'd been thinking about what would be best for the kids in the long run. He knew that they saw me as their father figure, that I was the one they came to with their problems, the one who helped them with homework and taught them how to ride bikes. He didn't want to disappear from their lives, but he wanted to make sure they had stability and security. The conversation was emotional and difficult, but it was also the most mature discussion we'd ever had. He talked about how his actions had damaged his relationship with his children, and how he wanted to make sure they had the legal protection that would come with me being their adoptive father. We worked out an arrangement where I would adopt them, but he would still have regular visitation rights. It was unconventional, but it seemed to be what was best for everyone involved. The kids would have the security of knowing that their family structure was solid, while still maintaining a relationship with their biological father. The adoption process was long and complicated, but it gave us all time to adjust to the new reality. The kids were excited about the idea of me being their real dad, but they also wanted to make sure their biological father understood that they still loved him too. On the day the adoption was finalized, something incredible happened. Their biological father was there in the courtroom, and when the judge declared that I was officially their father, he stood up and applauded. He came over to us afterward and shook my hand, telling me that he knew his children were in good hands. The whole experience changed me in ways I never expected. I'd gone from being a step-parent trying to find my place in a blended family to being the legal father of two children who had been through more trauma than most adults. It made me realize how much strength and resilience kids have, and how important it is to put their needs first. Looking back on everything that happened, I'm amazed at how much we all grew and changed. The man who had once tried to kidnap his children had become someone who was willing to give up his parental rights to ensure their happiness and security. The kids who had been traumatized by their father's actions learned to forgive and maintain a relationship with him. My wife and I learned how to navigate the complex emotions of a situation that none of us had ever imagined we'd be in. The custody drama that had once dominated our lives became a distant memory, replaced by a new kind of family dynamic that worked for everyone involved. The kids thrived in school, made friends, and seemed to put the traumatic events behind them. Their relationship with their biological father remained important to them, but it was now healthy and stable. The most important lesson I learned from the whole experience was that families can take many different forms, and that sometimes the most unexpected situations can lead to the most beautiful outcomes. The man I once saw as a threat to my family became someone I could respect and even consider a friend. The children who had been caught in the middle of adult drama found a way to love and be loved by multiple father figures. Today, almost 2 years later, we have a routine that works for everyone. The kids spend every other weekend with their biological father, and we all get together for major holidays and birthdays. It's not the blended family I originally imagined, but it's something even better, a family that was forged through crisis and came out stronger on the other side. The experience taught me that sometimes the worst situations can lead to the most profound growth and healing. What started as a terrifying attempt at kidnapping became the catalyst for creating a family structure that truly serves everyone's best interests. The kids learned that they are loved by multiple adults who are willing to put their needs first, and that's a gift that will serve them well throughout their lives.